Hello everybody, welcome to Teacher at Home. Today class we are going to learn the 8th chapter, The Making of the National Movement, 1870s and 1947. In the previous chapter, we have looked at the British conquest of territories and takeover of kingdoms, introduction of new laws and administrative institutions, changes in the lives of peasants and tribals, educational changes in the 19th century, debates regarding the condition of women, challenges to the caste system, social and religious reform, the revolt of 1857 and its aftermath, the decline of crafts and growth of industries. On the basis of what you have read about these issues, do you think Indians were discontented with British rule? If so, how were their different groups and classes dissatisfied? Emergence of nationalism. Above mentioned development led the people to ask a crucial question. What is this country of India and to whom is it mean? The answer that gradually emerged was India was the people of India, all the people, irrespective of class, color, caste, creed, language, or gender, and the country, its resources and systems were meant for all of them. With this answer came the awareness that the British were exercising control over the resources of India and the life of its people. Until this control was ended, India could not be Indians for Indians. This consciousness began to be clearly stated by the political association formed after 1850, especially those that came into being in the 1870s and 1880s. Most of these were led by English educated professionals such as lawyers. The most important ones were the Purva Sarvajanik Sabha, Indian Association, Madras Mahajan Sabha, the Bombay Presidency Association, and of course the Indian National Congress. Note the name Pune Sarvajanik Sabha. The literal meaning Sarvajanik is for all the people, Sarva, all Janik of the people. So many of these associations function in specific parts of the country. Their goals were stated as the goals of all the people of India, not those of any one region, community or class. They work with idea that the people should be sovereign, a modern consciousness and a key feature of nationalism. In other words, they believe that the Indian people should be empowered to take decisions regarding their affairs. The dissatisfactions with British rule intensified in the 1870s and 1880s. Arms Act was passed in 1878, disallowing Indians from possessing arms. In the same year, the Vernacular Press Act was also enacted in an effort to silence those who were critical to the government. Act allowed the government to confiscate the assets of newspapers, including their printing press, if the newspaper published anything that was found objectionable. In 1883, there was a furor over the attempt by the government to introduce the Ilbert Bill. The bill provided for the tribal of British or European persons by Indians and sought equality between British and Indian judges in the country. But when white opposition forced the government to withdraw the bill, Indians were enraged. They even highlighted the racial attitudes of the British in India. The need for all Indian association of educated Indians had been felt since 1880, but the Ilbert Bill controversy deepened this desire. The Indian National Congress was established when 72 delegates from all over the country met at Bombay in December 1885. The early leadership Dadabhai Nauroji, Firoz Shah Mehta, Badruddin Tyagji, W.C. Banerjee, Surendranath Banerjee, Ramesh Chandra Dutt, Subramanya Iyer, among others, was largely from Bombay and Calcutta. Nauroji, a businessman and publicist settled in London and for a time member of the British Parliament, guided the younger nationalists. A retired British official, A.O. Hume, also played a part in bringing Indians from the various regions together. Who did the Congress seek to speak for? A newspaper, the Indian Mirror, wrote in January 1886, "The first National Congress at Bombay is the nucleus of a future parliament of our country and will lead to the good of inconceivable magnitude for our countrymen. Badruddin Tiabji addressed the Congress as president in 1887. Thus, this Congress is composed of the representatives not of any one class or community of India, but of all the different communities in India. A nation in the making. It has often been said that the Congress is, in the first 20 years, was moderate in their objectives and methods. During this period, it demanded greater voice for Indians in the government and in administration. It wanted the legislative councils to be made more representative, given more power and introduced in provinces where none existed. It demanded that Indians be placed in high positions in the government. For this purpose, it called for civil service examination to be held in India as well, not just in London. The demand for Indianization of the administration was part of the movement against racism, since most important jobs at the time were monopolized by white officials, and the British generally assumed that Indians could not be given positions of responsibility since British officers were sending a major part of their large salaries home. Indianization, it has hoped, would also reduce the drain of wealth to England. Other demands included the separation of the judiciary from the executive, the repeal of the Arms Act, and the freedom of speech and expression. The early Congress also raised a number of iconic issues. It declared that British rule had led to poverty and famines. Increase in the land revenue had impoverished peasants and zamindars, and exports of grains to Europe had created food shortage. The Congress demanded reduction of revenue, cut in military expenditure, and more funds for irrigation. It passed many resolutions on the salt tax, treatment of Indian laborers abroad, and the sufferings of forest dwellers caused by an interfering forest administration. All this shows that, despite being a body of the educated elite, the Congress did not talk only on behalf of professional group, zamindars, or industrialists. The moderate leaders wanted to develop public awareness about the unjust nature of British rule. They published newspapers, wrote articles, and showed how British rule was leading to the economic ruin of the country. They criticized British rule in their speeches and sent representatives to different parts of the country to mobilize public opinion. They felt that the British had respect for the ideals of freedom and justice, and so they would accept the just demands of Indians. What was necessary, therefore, was to express these demands and make the government aware of the feelings of Indians in pursuit of gold. This is what a moderate leader, Dinshaw Wanja, wrote to Naroji in 1887. Firoz Shah is nowadays too busy with his personal work. They are already rich enough. Mr. Telang too remains busy. I wonder how, if all remain busy in the pursuit of gold, can the progress of the country be advanced. Freedom is our birthright. By the 1890s, many Indians began to raise the question about the political style of Congress in Bengal, Maharashtra, and Punjab. Leaders such as Bipin Chandra Pal, Balagangadhara Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai were beginning to explore more radical objectives and methods. They criticized the moderates for their politics or prayers and emphasized the importance of self-reliance and constructive work. They argued that people must rely on their own strength, not on the good intentions of the government. People must fight for Swaraj. Tilak raised the slogan, "Freedom is my birthright and I shall have it." 1905, Viceroy Curzon partitioned Bengal. At that time, Bengal was the biggest province of British India and included Bihar and parts of Orissa. The British argued for dividing Bengal for reasons of administrative convenience. But what did administrative convenience mean? Whose convenience did it represent? Clearly, it was closely tied to the interest of British officials and businessmen. Even so, instead of removing the non-Bengali areas from the province, the government separated East Bengal and merged it with Assam. Perhaps the main British motives were to curtail the influence of Bengali politicians and to split the Bengali people. The partitions of Bengal infuriated people all over India. All sessions of the Congress, the moderates and the radicals, as they may be called, opposed it. Large public meetings and demonstrations were organized and novel methods of mass protest developed. The struggle that untold came to be known as the Swadeshi movement, strongest in Bengal but with echoes elsewhere too. In Deltaic Andhra, for instance, it was known as the Vande Mataram movement. The Swadeshi movement sought to oppose British rule and encourage the ideas of self-help, Swadeshi enterprise, national education, and use of Indian languages. To fight for Swaraj, the radicals advocated mass mobilization and boycott of British institutions and goods. Some individuals also began to suggest that revolutionary violence would be necessary to overthrow the British rule. Opening decades of the 20th century were marked by other developments as well. A group of Muslim landlords and Nawabs formed the All India Muslim League at Dhaka in 1906. The league supported the partition of Bengal. It desired separate electorates for Muslims, a demand conceded by the government in 1909. Some seats in the councils were now reserved for Muslims who would be elected by Muslim voters. They tempted politicians to gather a following by distributing favors to their own religious group. A nationalist from Punjab, he was one of the leading members of the radical group which was critical of the politics of petitions. He was also an active member of the Arya Samaj, opposed to the Meanwhile, the Congress split in 1907. The moderates were opposed to the use of boycott. They felt that it involved use of force. After the split, the Congress came to be dominated by the moderates with Tilak's followers functioning from outside. The two groups reunited in December 1915. Next year, the Congress and the Muslim League signed the historic Lucknow Pact and decided to work together for representative government in the country. The growth of the mass nationalization. After 1919, the struggle against British rule gradually became a mass movement involving peasants, tribal students, and women in large numbers and occasionally factory workers as well. Certain business groups too began to be actively support the Congress in the 1920s. Why was this so? The First World War altered the economic and political situation in India. It led to huge rise in the defense expenditure of the government of India. The government in turn increased taxes on individual incomes and business profits, increased military expenditure and the demands for war. Supplies lead to the sharp rise in prices which created great difficulties to the common people. On the other hand, business group reaped fabulous profits from the war. As you have seen, the war created a demand for industrial goods and caused a decline of imports from other countries into India. So Indian industries expanded during the war and Indian business group began to demand greater opportunities for development. The war also led the British to expand their army. Villages were pressurized to supply soldiers for an aligned cause. A large number of soldiers were sent to serve abroad. Many returned after the war with an understanding of the ways in which imperialist powers were exploiting the peoples of Asia and Africa with a desire to oppose colonial rule in India. Furthermore, in 1917, there was a revolution in Russia. News about peasants and workers' struggles and ideas of socialism circulated widely, inspiring Indian nationalists. Advent of Mahatma Gandhi. It is in these circumstances that Mahatma Gandhi emerged as a mass leader. As you know, Gandhiji, aged 46, arrived in India in 1915 from South Africa. Having led Indians in the country in non-violent marches against racist restrictions, he was already a respected leader known internationally. His South African campaigns had brought him in contact with various types of Indians, Hindus, Muslims, Parsis and Christians, Gujaratis, Tamils and North Indians, and upper class merchants, lawyers and workers. Mahatma Gandhi spent his first year in India traveling throughout the country, understanding the people, their needs and overall situation. His earliest interventions were in local movements in Chambar and Khed and Ahmedabad, where he came to contact with Rajendra Prasad and Vallabhbhai Patel. In Ahmedabad, he led a successful mill worker strike in 1980. Let us now focus in some detail on the movements organized between 1918, 19 and 1922, the Rowlatt Satyagraha. In 1919, Gandhiji gave a call for the Satyagraha against the Rowlatt Act that the British had just passed. Act curbed fundamental rights such as the freedom of expression and strengthened police powers. Mahatma Gandhi, Muhammad Ali Jinnah and others felt that government had no right to restrict people's basic freedom, criticized the act as devilish and tyrannical. Gandhiji asked the Indian people to observe 6th April 1919 as a day of non-violent opposition to this act, as a day of humiliation and prayer, and Hartal strike, Satyagraha, Sabhas were set up to launch the movement. The Rowlatt Satyagraha turned out the first all India struggle against the British government, although it was largely restricted to cities. In April 1919, there were a number of demonstrations and hartals in the country, and the government used brutal measures to suppress them. Jallianwala Bagh atrocities inflicted by General Dyer in Amritsar on Baisakhi Day, 13th April, were a part of the repression. On learning about the massacre, Rabindranath Tagore expressed the pain and anger of the country by renouncing his knighthood. During the Rowlatt Satyagraha, the participants tried to ensure the Hindus and Muslims were united in the fight against British rule. There was also the call of Mahatma Gandhi, who always saw India as a land of all the people who lived in the country, Hindus, Muslims, and those of other religions. He was keen that Hindus and Muslims support each other in any just cause. Eternal law of suffering. What did Mahatma Gandhi mean by ahimsa? How could ahimsa become the basis of struggle? This is what Gandhiji said. Non-violence comes to us through the doing good continually without the slightest expectation of return. That is the indispensable lesson in non-violence. In South Africa, I succeeded in learning the eternal law of suffering as the only remedy for undoing wrong and injustice. It means positively the law of non-violence. You have to be prepared to suffer cheerfully at the hands of all and sundry, and you will wish ill to no one, not even to those who may have wronged you. Mahatma Gandhi. Khilafat agitation and the non-cooperation movement. Khilafat issue was one such cause. 1920, the British imposed a harsh treaty on the Turkish Sultan or Khalifa. People were furious about this as they had been about the Jallianwala massacre. Also, Indian Muslims were keen that the Khalifa be allowed to retain control over Muslim sacred places in the erstwhile Ottoman Empire. The leaders of the Khilafat agitation, Muhammad Ali and Shaukat Ali, now wished to initiate a full-fledged non-cooperation movement. Gandhiji supported their call and urged the Congress to combine against Punjab wrongs, Jallianwala massacre, the Khilafat wrong and demand Swaraj. The non-cooperation movement gained momentum through 1921-22. Thousands of students left government-controlled colleges and schools. Many lawyers such as Motilal Nehru, C.R. Das, C. Rajagopalachari, and Asaf Ali gave up their practices. British titles were surrendered and legislatures boycotted. People lit public bonfires of foreign cloth. Imports of foreign cloth fell drastically between 1920 and 22. But all this were merely the tip of the iceberg. Large parts of the country were on the brink of the formidable revolt. People's initiatives. In many cases, people resisted British rule non-violently. In others, different classes and groups, interpreting Gandhiji's call in their own manner, protested in ways that were not in accordance with his ideas. In either case, people linked their movements to local grievances. Let us look at a few examples. In Kedah, Gujarat, Patidar peasants organized non-violent campaigns against the high land revenue demand of the British. In coastal Andhra and interior Tamil Nadu, liquor shops were picketed. In the Guntur district of Andhra Pradesh, tribals and poor peasants staged a number of forest satyagrahas, sometimes sending their cattle into forests without paying grazing fee. They were protesting people, the colonial state had restricted their use of forest resources in various ways. They believed that Gandhiji would get the taxes reduced and have the forest regulations abolished. In many forest villages, peasants proclaimed Swaraj and believed that Gandhi Raj was about to be established. In Sindh, now in Pakistan, Muslim traders and peasants were very enthusiastic about the Khilafat call. In Bengal, too, the Khilafat non-cooperation alliance gave enormous communal unity and strength to the national movement. In Punjab, the Akali agitation of the Sikhs sought to remove corrupt Mahants supported by the British from their Gurudwaras. The movement could closely identified with the non-cooperation movement. In Assam, tea garden laborers shouting Gandhi Maharaj Ki Jai demanded a big increase in their wages. They left the British-owned plantation amidst declaration that they were following Gandhiji's wish. Interestingly, in the Assamese Vaishnava songs of the period, the reference to Krishna was substituted by Gandhi Raja, the people's Mahatma. We can see from the above that sometimes people thought of Gandhiji as a kind of messiah, as someone who could help them overcome their misery and poverty. Gandhiji wished to build classic unity, not class conflict, yet peasants could imagine that he would help them in their fight against zamindars, and agricultural laborers believed that he could provide them land. At times, ordinary people credited Gandhiji with their own achievements. For instance, at the end of the powerful movement, peasants of Pratapgarh in the United Provinces, now Uttar Pradesh, managed to stop illegal evictions of tenants, but they felt it was Gandhiji who had won this demand for them. At other times, using Gandhiji's name, tribals and peasants undertook actions that did not conform to Gandhijian ideals. It was he who got Bethekli stopped in Pratapgarh. The following is an extract from the CID report on the Kisan movement in Allahabad district, January 1921. A currency with Mr. Gandhi's name has occurred even in the remote villages is astonishing. No one seems to know quite who or what he is, but it is an accepted fact that he says is so and he orders must be done. He is a Mahatma or Sadhu, a Pundit, a Brahmin who lives in Allahabad. Even a Diotam, the real power of his name is to be traced back to the idea that he was got into Bedakli illegal eviction stopped in Pratapgarh as a general rule. Gandhi is not thought of being antagonistic to government but only to the Zamindars. We are for Gandhiji and the Sarkar. Happenings of 1922-29. Mahatma Gandhi, as you know, was against violent movements. He abruptly called off the non-cooperation movement when in February 1922 a crowd of peasants set fire to the police station in Chauri Chaura. 22 policemen were killed on that day. Peasants were provoked because the police have fired on the peaceful demonstration. Once the non-cooperation movement was over, Gandhiji's followers stressed that the Congress must undertake constructive work in the rural areas. Other leaders such as Chittaranjan Das and Motilal Nehru argued that the party should fight elections to the councils and enter them in order to influence government policies. Through sincere social work in villages in the mid-1920s, Gandhians were able to extend their support base. This proved to be very useful in launching the civil disobedience movement in 1930. Two important developments of the mid-1920s were the formation of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, a Hindu organization, and the Communist Party of India. These parties have held very different ideas about the kind of country India should be. Find out about the ideas and with the help of your teacher. Revolutionary nationalist Bhagat Singh too was active in that period. The decade closed the Congress resolving to fight for Purna Swaraj in 1929 under the presidency of Jawaharlal Nehru. Consequently, Independence Day was observed on 26 January 1930 all over the country. It takes a loud voice to make the deaf hear. Inqilab Zindabad. Revolutionary nationalists such as Bhagat Singh, Chandrasekhar Azad, Sukhdev and others wanted to fight against the colonial rule and the rich exploiting classes through a revolution of workers and peasants. For this purpose, they found the Hindustan Socialist Republican Association (HSRA) 1928 at Firozshah Kotla in Delhi. On 17 December 1928, Bhagat Singh, Azad and Rajguru assassinated Saunders, a police officer who was involved in the lathi charge that had caused the death of Lala Lajpat Rai. On 8th April 1929, Bhagat Singh and B.K. Dutt threw a bomb in the Central Legislative Assembly. Aim, as a leaflet explained, was not to kill but to make the deaf hear and to remind the foreign government of its callous exploitation. Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev and Rajguru were executed on March 23, 1931. Bhagat Singh, age at the time was only 23. The march to Dundee. Purna Swaraj would never come on its own. It had to be fought for. In 1930, Gandhiji declared that he would lead a march to break the salt law. According to this law, the state had a monopoly on the manufacture and sale of salt. Mahatma Gandhi, along with other nationalists, reasoned that it was sinful to tax salt since it is such an essential item of our food. The salt mark related the general desire of freedom to a specific grievances shared by everybody and thus did not divide the rich and the poor. Gandhi and his followers marched for over 250 miles from Sabarmati to the coastal town to Dundee, where they broke the government law by gathering natural salt found on the seashore and boiling salt water to produce salt. Women in the freedom struggle, Ambabai from Karnataka. Women from diverse backgrounds participated in the national movement. Young and old, single and married. They came from rural and urban areas, from both conservative and liberal homes. Involvement was significant for the freedom struggle, for the women's movement, and for themselves personally. Both British officials and Indian nationalists felt that women's participation gave the national struggle for immense force. Participation in the freedom movement brought women out of their homes. It gave them a place in the professions in the governance of India and could pave the way for equality with men. What such participation meant for women is best recounted by them. Ambabai of Karnataka had been married at age 12. Widowed at 16, she picketed foreign clothes and liquor shops in Udupi. She was arrested, served a sentence, and was re-arrested. Between prison terms, she made speeches, thought spinning, organized Prabhat Paris. Ambabai regarded this as the happiest days of her life because they gave it a new purpose and commitment. Women, however, had to fight for their right to participate in the movement. During the Salt Satyagraha, for instance, when Mahatma Gandhi was initially opposed to women's participation, Sarojini Naidu had to persuade him to allow women to join the movement. Peasants, tribals, and women participate in large numbers. A business federation published a pamphlet on the salt issue. The government tried to crush the movement through the brutal action against peaceful satyagrahas. Thousands were sent to jail. The combined struggles of the Indian people bore fruit where the Government of India Act of 1935 prescribed provincial autonomy and the government announced elections to the provincial legislatures in 1937. The Congress formed governments in 7 out of 11 provinces. In September 1939, after 2 years of Congress rule in the provinces, the Second World War broke out. Critical to Hitler, Congress leaders were ready to support the British war effort, but in return they wanted that India he granted independence after the war. The British refused to concede the demand. The Congress ministries resigned in protest. Veer Lankan Naik was hanged. Baji Muhammad, president of the Nabrangapur Congress Orissa in 1930s report. On August 25, 1942, 19 people died on the spot in police firing at Paparangadi in Nabrangpur. Many died thereafter from their wounds. Over 300 were injured. More than 1,000 were jailed in Gorakhpur district. Several were shot or executed. Veer Langan Naik was hanged. Naik Baji Tellas was not worried about being executed, only sad that he would not live to see freedom's dawn. Baji Muhammad mobilized 20,000 people to join the national struggle. He offered satyagraha many times over. He participated in protest against the Second World War and the Quit India movement and served long jail terms. Quit India and later, Mahatma Gandhi decided to initiate a new phase of the movement against the British in the middle of the Second World War. The British must quit India immediately, he told them. To the people, he said, do or die in your effort to fight the British, but you must fight not violently. Gandhiji and other leaders were jailed at once, but the movement spread. It specially attracted peasants and the youth who gave up the studies to join it. Communications and symbols of state authority. were attacked all over the country. In many areas, the people set up their own governments. The first response of the British was severe repression. By the end of 1943, over 90,000 people were arrested and about 1,000 killed in police firing. In many areas, orders were given to machine gun crowds from airplanes. The rebellion, however, ultimately brought the Raj to his knees. A radical nationalist with socialist leanings, Bose did not share Gandhiji's ideas of ahimsa, though he respected him as the father of the nation. In January 1941, he secretly left his Calcutta home, went to Singapore via Germany and raised the Azad Hind Fauj or the Indian National Army. To free India from British control in 1944, the INA tried to enter India through the Impal and Kohima, but the campaign failed. INA members were imprisoned and tired. People across the country from all walks of life participate in the movement against the INA trials towards independence and partition. Meanwhile, 1940, the Muslim League had moved a resolution demanding independent states for Muslims in the northwestern and eastern areas of the country. The resolution did not mention partition of Pakistan. Why did the League ask for an autonomous arrangement of the Muslims to the subcontinent? From late 1930s, the League began viewing the Muslims as a separate nation from the Hindus. In developing this nation, it may be influenced by the history of tension between some Hindu and Muslim group in the 1920s and 30s. More importantly, the provincial elections in 1937 seem to have convinced the League that Muslims were a minority and they would always have to play second fiddle in any democratic structure. It feared that Muslims may even go unrepresented. The Congress rejections of the League's desire to form a joint Congress-League government in the United Provinces in 1937 also annoyed the League. The Congress's failure to mobilize the Muslim masses in 1930s allowed the League to widen their social support. It sought to enlarge its support in the early 1940s when most Congress leaders were in jail. At the end of the war in 1945, the British opened negotiations between the Congress and the League and themselves for the independence in India. The talk failed because the League saw itself as the sole spokesperson of India's Muslims. The Congress could not accept their claim since a large number of Muslims still supported it. Elections of the provinces were again held in 1946. Congress did well in the general constituencies, but the League's success in the seats reserved for Muslims was spectacular. It persisted with its demand for Pakistan. In March 1946, the British cabinet sent a three-member mission to Delhi to explain this demand and to suggest a suitable political framework for a free India. This mission suggested that India should remain united and constitute itself as a loose confederation with some autonomy for Muslim majority areas, but it could not get the Congress and the Muslim League to agree to specific details of the proposal. Partition now became more or less inevitable. After the failure of the cabinet mission, the Muslim League decided on mass agitation for winning its Pakistan demand. It announced 6th August 1946 as Direct Action Day. On this day, a riot broke out in Calcutta, lasting several days and resulting in the death of thousands of people. By March 1947, violence spread to different parts of the northern India. Many hundred thousand people were killed and numerous women had to face untold brutalities during the partition. Millions of people were forced to flee their homes, torn asunder from their homelands. They were reduced as refugees in allied lands. Partition also mean that India changed, many of its cities changed, and a new country, Pakistan, was born. So the joy of our country's independence from British rule came mixed with the pain and violence of partition. So that's all about this chapter. If you are interested, please do like, share and subscribe my channel. Okay, thank you.